Every level has another devil. And it's not until you actually get into it that you realise that every time you step change in your business, you're going to get rid of some of the old challenges, welcome some new ones, experience and enjoy what it's like at the next level. In this podcast blueprint, I'm going to take you through a behind the scenes insight into what I've experienced in the first 6 months of going from being an executive director to becoming a non-executive chairman. If you have the aspirations of getting to a point where you're a business owner, not an operator, where you have companies around the world that have team members that you've never met, and you genuinely can increase your hourly rate into the tens of thousands and your annual profits into the multiple 7 figures, then this may be a blueprint that you want to listen to. This is the chairman, this is my experience, and this is 15 things that I've learned in the last 6 months breaking through to the next level. For those of you that listen to this podcast frequently and have followed us for the last few years, you will have seen me go on a journey of exploration and a bit of searching, trying to figure out where do I want to be, what do I want to do, and what will actually make me happy in the next stage of my journey. This is my 21st year in business, and every year really since 2019, I've been breaking through to this next level. However, as I shared in the Breaking Through Blueprint a couple of episodes ago, it's not without its challenges. It's always harder moving up to the next level than you think. And actually, most of the experiences that you've had to date will not carry a huge amount of weight moving into this next space. And what I've done over the last 5 years is gradually move out of my executive roles and had more interests and investments in other companies that I have no input in on the day to day. And whilst for the last 20 years I've been starting, systemizing, scaling and selling companies, actually the next level for me is really moving up to this next level called the chairman, where I have no executive responsibilities at all. So what I've done is I've started over the last 5 years to learn how this works. I've been a non-exec director for various companies for almost a decade. And with my own portfolio of companies, which was at one point over 30 separate companies that I owned and was involved in all of them in some capacity, since 2019, I've drastically reduced those companies. I've sold them off. And from a number of big exits, I have reduced my portfolio. My team has gone from 40 plus down to my direct team, less than a handful. And my involvement in day to day has become less and less up to now, where in the last 6 months, I've moved out of my final executive positions, brought in a team of directors below me to run the company's day to day. And it's the final step of a 5-year journey to move out of all my executive roles, out of all my managing director positions, into the chairman role, which is very new for me. It's very different for me. It's not something that I've experienced previously. And it's been a challenge, to say the least. Having now started to see myself break through and be 4 or 5 months into it, by the end of this month, I will then have exited completely, broken through to the next level, and then enjoyed it at that level. So what have I learned over the last six months as I've step changed from this active, still in some capacities, active MD and CEO role, up to becoming the chairman, where I have no involvement in the day-to-day. This blueprint is part of what we teach on Property Entrepreneur, and there's 3 levels to go through. There's the landlord, there's the investor, there's the entrepreneur. At the beginning, it's the band of brothers, where you're very much involved with friends, family. It's life and death. You absolutely love it. Then you build the dream team, which is start up to scale up, the best that you can afford, and you hold the thing together with culture and drive and entrepreneurial magic. Then the top level, you've got the professionals, which is where you don't buy what you can afford, you buy the best that exists, and you bring the best people in. And then finally, you move from being an MD and a CEO up to becoming a chairman, where you're not involved on a daily, weekly, or even a monthly basis. You're more interested in business plans, budget and actuals, and board meetings, and all of the other stuff very much happens at arm's length. The team don't know you. You've got employees around the world who you've never met. There's people making 6 and 7 figure decisions on your behalf that you know, like, and trust, and have been empowered to do that. And you get the benefit of not being actively involved, but you also have the risk and the anxiety that comes with no longer holding onto the steering wheel, having your feet on the pedals, or even being in the car. And this is the journey, really. This is what we teach on the blueprints. And if you haven't already attended one of our 3-day events, go to www.don'ttalktotenants.co.uk and check out the 3-day blueprint. We teach this once a year. It's the blueprint start to finish at the Belfry Golf and Spa Resort. For those of you overseas, you can do it virtually. And it is this blueprint start to finish. We only host it once a year. It's 100% money back guarantee. If you're serious about making 6 and 7 figure profits, it's the only way to do it, and you've got absolutely nothing to lose. So this is my 21st year of experiencing this. It's my 11th year of teaching it. And these are 15 lessons that I've learned in the first 6 months, going from being an executive director or CEO to moving up to the chairman level, where I'm not working in the business at all. And actually, I'm handing over the keys to a team of directors to take the business forward. So the first is when we talk about bringing people in, and we talk about this, there's actually a podcast blueprint coming out soon called PDP, Professional Development Plan. And in there, I talk about the fact that effective incentives are everything. So in business, the only 3 things you need to know and do is, the first is you need to know what you want. The second is you then need to recruit a team to do it for you. And the third is that the team you recruit to do it for you do it because they want to, because it's in their interest. All anyone cares about in this world is what's in it for them. And the first lesson I learned is that effective incentives are absolutely everything, and you want to pay well. You may have heard me talk about this previously, but about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, when I paid my first 6-figure employee, I couldn't believe that I was paying somebody 6 figures. And I felt very nervous, felt very anxious, couldn't believe it. But then when a year in, 2 years, I started to realize that those people that were being paid 6 figures were now making me 7 figures, I finally got it. And going from MD to chairman is exactly that. It's all about having an effective incentive plan where everybody that you're handing over to, so the other directors, senior team, are all bought into the target. So actually, they're not turning up every day trying to build your business for you. They're turning it up every day trying to do their job and deliver and achieve their success, because the outcome is for them. You know, they're going to get paid well. They're going to get rewarded well. They're going to get remunerated well. And when I talk about the fact that effective incentives is, it has to be built effectively. If you're going to give someone a zero basic and then a £500,000 performance related pay, it's going to have to be a very, very unique position and person for that to work. It needs to have jam today, it needs to have jam tomorrow, and it needs to be fully aligned so that it works for the business and it works for the team. So effective incentives. You've got to understand how to build effective incentives. It is an art form. You know, I've just spent a month teaching it on Property Entrepreneur. It is an art form, it is a craft, but ultimately you need to pay people well and pay them effectively. The second is, it's not all about you. And one of my team members about 6 months ago said, it's not all about you, Dan. And they sort of said it half jokingly, because I said, I can't believe we had a world-class event and I didn't even speak on stage. And they sort of said half jokingly, it's not all about you, Dan. But what I realised was actually it's not all about me. And this is where, in this case, I was very active in the business. My profile is quite a big part of the business. But actually, as directors and entrepreneurs, we feel like we have to be part of this thing, and that it is reliant on us. Now, it absolutely is to a degree, and you have to put the sweat equity in. You have to get the momentum going, build the culture, the drive, the standards, the vision, and get it going. But you don't necessarily have to be the one to keep it going. Once you know what the business is and what it needs to be, there very much is an opportunity for you to step out if you get it right. And the second learning for me was, it's not all about me. And actually, I can add as much value from what I know or who I bring in and recruit as I can from actually being there, banging the drum, rallying the troops, and putting my name or face to it. The third is the difference between going through the levels, where you've got the startup, which is Band of Brothers, the scale up, which is when you go on your growth curve with your dream team, a founder-led business, which is you as the managing director or CEO, where you really are in there as a founder and you do certain things in a founder-like way, to actually be in a director-led business. And what I've realised from bringing in a board of directors to run the show is the certain mindsets and decisions as a founder with regards to basically being nice in many capacities, being nice, being soft, and not potentially running it like a business, overspending, under disciplining. Whereas actually, when you bring a director in who's directly focused on them delivering their outcome, which is target driven, their decision making process can be very different. And that's really refreshing to see, because actually, as a founder, you might not be as strict on credit control as you should be. You might overspend on development projects because you want to be nice to the main contractor. You might make certain decisions or do things in a certain way. You might not discipline your team or hold them as accountable as you should do, because you're this multifaceted, magical, entrepreneurial leader, manager, teammate, etc., etc. Actually, when you move from being founder-led to being director-led, that changes very quickly. And as long as it's for the best of the business, which I'll talk about, is very, very valuable. The fourth is people don't always know what they want or know what is good for them. And Henry Ford always said, if you asked people what they wanted, they would have said they wanted faster horses. Whereas he went out and obviously created the first car, mass production car. Steve Jobs said if you'd have asked people in the 90s what they wanted from mobile phones, they'd have said they wanted smaller phones with bigger buttons, because the technology at the time was all about how do you go from this brick phone with a briefcase to it got smaller and smaller and smaller till you ended up with like the 8210, which was tiny screen, tiny phone, tiny buttons. Actually, Steve Jobs then released the iPhone, which was 3 times the size and had no buttons. Nobody would have asked for it, but everybody actually wanted it. And when you ask the team or your clients or your suppliers about, what's their thoughts about you bringing in a dedicated marketing person to run their contract, or how would you feel if I brought a new finance director in to reshape this department, or how would you feel if I brought a new managing director in to run the senior team? Most people would say that would not be their preference, because they like what is there at the moment. Whereas what I realised is actually, as long as you're doing it for the right reasons, and what I mean by this is when I get to one of the later rules, in fact, the next one, is what has to be in your head when you're making these decisions. As long as you know what the desired outcome is for the team and for the business and for the clients, and that actually it is a value add, you have to go through the conscious effort of understanding that in order to achieve that, you have to override what other people might tell you, which is that they don't think that's going to work, or they don't like that. But then actually, when you change it and you get through the change management dip and the change management process, and they see it's better, you've got to have confidence and conviction to do that breakthrough, because most people won't. And it's a very difficult thing to understand, but it's something that I've very proactively done over the last 6 months. And actually, having now seen it played out in practice, it's absolutely the right way to go. People didn't want faster horses. They wanted cars. People didn't want a smaller phone with bigger buttons. They wanted the iPhone. People didn't want X, Y, and Z, but now they've got it. They're so grateful that it's there. That's been a real key lesson for me. The next is 5 is it has to be a win-win. And what I mean here is actually not a win-win. You'll hear me talk about win-win-win. And it has to be a win for the business, it has to be a win for the team, and it has to be a win for the clients. And if you can accommodate that trifecta of making decisions that are a win-win-win, the outcome is absolutely inevitable. And every decision you make needs to have the clients, the team, and the business in core focus. And all you're ever trying to achieve is a win-win-win. And when you can look at that, and ultimately you win because all other three parties win, it's a no-brainer. Number 6 is the value that I prevent from being in the way and being in the wrong seat is huge. So it would be easy for me to now say that I'm seeing the benefits of what I've done over the last 6 months. I could have done this, or I should have done this 5 years ago. Whereas actually the reality is I wouldn't have been in a position to do it 6 years ago. I wouldn't have had the access to the capital that I've got now 6 years ago, and I wouldn't have been able to do it. So it's easy to say I should have done it sooner, but I don't think I could have done. And actually one of my senior team said to me, this is working out absolutely perfectly. Why didn't we do it 5 years ago? And I said, the reality is we wouldn't have been able to do it 5 years ago. The business wasn't where it needed to be. We didn't have the resource to be able to do it. And it had to go through those gears to get to where it is today. So timing's a huge thing. But what's become very visible is that the value that I've prevented from being in the way and from stepping out of the way, back in the day on the Blueprint events, we used to call this the freedom stage, where you let go of the business, you go on holiday for 2 weeks, you turn your phone off, and you see if it actually flies or not. What I've realised from going through this first 3 to 6 months of stepping out and seeing things happen, it has been noticeable when I go to meetings, when I look at reports, when I look at products. It's been noticeable that actually me getting out of the way has enabled the next level of talent to come up and drive it forward. And because of where I was personally, because of my distraction across multiple projects, deals, products, companies, development sites, I was always spread quite thin. Actually, having got 10 years worth of experience, momentum, team members that have been there for 5, 6, 7 years that are now stepping up, actually seeing them take it to the next level is very clear that I was very, very much a bottleneck and getting in the way. So it was absolutely the right thing to do at the right time. And that's been a visible game changer. The next is number 7, which is the biggest battle has actually been in my own mind. And if you've not listened to the Blueprint, the Breakthrough Blueprint episode 206, if you want to go to the next level, use that blueprint that I shared on episode 206, because it really is the blueprint that I've used to go through this. And October, November, December, I started sort of breaking through and moving in that direction. But I realised if I was going to actually break through to the chairman level, which I've never done, like I'll frankly say for 5 years, I've progressively moved in that direction, but I've never completely broken through because I've still had executive roles in maybe 2 or 3 companies. Whereas through this final phase of going to chairman level, I've now removed all of those, either by selling them, by putting in directors, by bringing in senior team members, developing people on PDPs. I've now stepped out of all of my executive roles. The biggest challenge I actually had is in my mind, because I pride myself, for 21 years, I've prided myself on hard work, visible leadership, culture, being the one driving the team. And to then go to a chairman role where it's more about the value that you add than the volume of work you do is very different. Going from a point where I speak to my team definitely on a weekly basis, sometimes even on a daily basis, to not speaking to them at most monthly, for some not at all, is a very different experience. And actually a lot of that has been in my mind. And there's a great quote, I think it's Gandhi, maybe not. And he says, if you change the way you look at the world that you look at will change. And I can honestly say, hand on heart, the changes that I've made over the last 3 to 6 months about the way that I look at myself, the way that I look at the way I do things, the way I look at my businesses, has fundamentally changed the way I live my life. And I remember about 12 months ago, my life coach, who's actually a life coach to all the board members on Property Entrepreneur, said, what would your definition of success be? And I said it would be to be able to eat my breakfast with my partner and not feel like I should be on my laptop working. And that was a really significant thing for me to benchmark, because at the time, I always felt like I was chasing my tail. I always felt like I needed to be busy. If I was awake, I was working. If I was, I needed to always be available for my team on WhatsApp, be available, be accessible, be in that sort of space. And nowadays, only 3 to 6 months on, having broken through, going into WhatsApp is a rarity. So I'll only go in there once or twice a day. Whereas previously I would have had it on my screen all day, every day. I did a blueprint recently about inbox management. Go and have a listen to that. It's these breakthrough step changes of what it feels like. And most of the things are in your head. And sometimes they'll work for you, like working hard and burning the candle at both ends and being a masochist. Absolutely. That's the only way to get into making high 6, if not 7 figures a year to get the thing going. But once you're making £100,000 a year, half £500,000 a year, a few £1 million a year, and it's not serving you, burning yourself out, being a masochist, that's when you have to change. And the biggest challenge there is very much in your mind. And that's what I've experienced. Number 8, and this was actually the senior team. Their strategy this year is new team, new dream, A players only. If you want to go up to this chairman level, you've got to have A players, like A players who are not the best you can afford, the best in the market. They're world class. They've got track record. You're paying salaries that make your eyes water. You compare them against what they would get in the open market for a similar job, and it's in some cases it's 50% more, 100% more, because you're finding that talent. You're progressing it up with PDPs. You've got solid incentive plans, and you want to move from the hub and spoke model to the siloed approach. And the hub and spoke, there's a podcast blueprint coming out soon about it. The hub and spoke model is very much where you start, where you're the hub in the business. Everyone talks to you, they relate to you. You're in the WhatsApp group, you're in the Slack channels. And although you might think you're a managing director or a CEO, you're very much the middle of the business. And actually, if you disappeared for a month, service would fall down. It would fall to pieces. It would lose the magic, lose the vibe, lose the hype. That's the hub and spoke model, where you're the hub in the middle, and then all the bits of the business come off of you as spokes. A siloed approach is where you have A players at the head of each department, and basically MSOF, MSOF, marketing, sales, operations, finance. Each of those four things has a director level team member running the show, and they run it as a silo. So you have a head of marketing, head of operations, head of sales, head of finance, and they're running the show. And they're better than you and more senior than you in those roles, running that function. And you can only really move to the chairman level if you've got those people in place. And of course, this comes at a point. When I say about I couldn't have afforded it a few years ago, you're talking about getting to a point where you've got a seven-figure board of six-figure executives if you want to go to 8 figures. But it might, it can be smaller. But you're talking about spending hundreds of thousands of pounds a year on a board of directors who are going to run the show. So you need to have money. You need to be in that position. This isn't something you can do at day one of building your startup unless you're heavily funded. Number 9 is, with that in mind, is you have to be prepared to spend. As soon as I decided I was going to step out, I had to look at how much it was going to cost, and I had to basically write checks for hundreds of thousands of pounds, investing in the business, investing in the team, creating incentive plans, all of this stuff. The reality is you have to be prepared to spend. If you want to move up to this level, you have to buy back your time. And whilst everybody else might immediately start doing better, it's going to cost you 3, 6, 9, 12, even 24 months to get through the dip of spending, forward funding, bringing in a senior team of directors until you actually see the return of that money go into the bottom line. So you have to be prepared to spend, and you can't do it without money. The 10th is recruiting within, and specifically, if you can get it, founder mindset. And I actually learned this retrospectively. I did it organically because I tried to recruit from within before I went to the open market. And in in 3 of the 4 cases of the senior team, I managed to do that internally, which is fantastic because they're people who've either worked in the business or been clients of the business and have worked with the business for 3 to 7 years. So you've got that internal progression, which just makes a lot of sense in some cases. It's not always the desired outcome. Like I said, one of the recruits was completely external. I went internally, I went to my market, I went to my audience, and I couldn't find them, so I recruited externally. But 3 of the 4 were recruited internally because they've got that experience, they understand the business, I know, like, and trust them, and for me, it was the logical next step for them. The other one was an external recruit. And in any of those spaces, if you can get a founder-led mindset, because going to the chairman level is about having a senior team of directors, and especially an MD or a CEO, who's got that founder-led mentality. Obviously, they've all got to be remunerated accordingly, but they've got that founder-led mentality where it's life and death. It's not just a job. It's a challenge. It's the way they think, the way they're driven, the way they work. They're going to have the sleepless nights. They're going to pull in the work at the weekend. If you want to scale up, like we're looking at more than doubling the company over the next 3 years, that's not going to happen by working 8:30 till 5:30 with an hour lunch. It's just not the way the world works. And actually, having now started to read more around the chairman role, Warren Buffett, a guy called Andrew Henderson that I've started following, and Andrew Wilkinson and Naval Ravikant, who's actually my hero this year. They talk about recruiting from within and that founder drive mentality are absolutely essential. So I could only, in fact, this is number 10 as well, is I could only connect the dots looking backwards. All of that makes a lot of sense now and seems logical, but in some cases you have to figure this stuff out on the fly by actually doing it and leveraging all the experience I've had over the last 21 years to figure out what's the business going to look like for the next 10 years. And there is a bit of suck it and see. Equally, I did a lot of research and a lot of reading going through the process. Number 11 is if you want to step up the business, the biggest thing you can do is identify where the bottlenecks are. What I've realized is my biggest bottleneck was expertise and capacity. I was the biggest bottleneck being top of the tree. So getting me out of the way has created that runway for people to move forward, and going from having one person at the top of the business, which was me, to having 4 people at the top of the business underneath an MD, marketing, sales, operations, and finance. It's just an absolute no-brainer. Again, it's a win-win-win. The clients win, the business wins, and the team win. Number 12 is you have to be ready to hand over the keys and step back. And also, like with a child learning to walk, you have to let them fall over. And the reality is you have to be in a position mentally, emotionally, financially, where you can hand over the keys and not only get out of the driving seat, but actually get out of the car, because you're now trusting the navigation of the business, the driving of the business, the handling of it, the acceleration, the braking, the safe driving of the business to a team of other people. And you have to be emotionally, physically, and financially in a position where you can hand over the keys, and whether the child falls over or not, you're happy with it. You've got to let them make their own mistakes. That's really, really key. And you've got to let them run with it. I've been in multiple conversations over the last 6 months where I've said, they've asked my opinion, so I'll only offer feedback where it's invited in most cases, because you have to let them run with it. You can't have your cake and eat it. You don't want to buy a dog and bark yourself. If you want to do this, you've got to be mentally, emotionally, and financially ready to do it. But where I've been offered my opinion, I've said in many cases, this is my opinion. I don't think that's the right thing to do, but I'm not going to stop you from doing it. Like, I've offered my input, I've offered my insight. In some cases, they then decide not to do it because my feedback or perspective or direction gave them insight that they didn't have, and they took that on board and didn't do it. In some cases, they've progressed with it regardless, because they've taken my view on board. They've considered it with their own research, their own due diligence, their own consideration, and they still believe it to be the right thing to do. And ultimately, you want to recruit a director or a managing director or a CEO who is better than you, is better placed than you, is going to take it to the place where you haven't taken it. And you have to trust the fact that they need to put their own stamp on it. They need to do it their own way. You're going from being founder-led to being director-led. And this is a big shift. And you've got to be confident to do that. Number 13 is quite similar. And I actually learned this from somebody else. And they call it the swoop and poop, where because you're not involved anymore, any opportunity you have to get involved, you swoop in, offer some feedback or direction, basically poop on what they're doing, and then you disappear off. And then afterwards you think, I wish I hadn't have done that. It's just that parental, whatever we do it. Sometimes maybe we want to feel significant. Sometimes we just feel like there's always opportunity to improve. Sometimes we just forget that our previous job was to spot mistakes, opportunities, threats, weaknesses, and feed that back to the team. That's no longer our responsibility now. We're not in the driving seat and we're not even in the car. Once they set off and you wave them goodbye, you've got to be happy that they're going to crack on with it. Don't swoop and poop. Don't come in and uninvitedly swoop in, feedback on what they're doing, and then swoop out, because that's not your job anymore. The 14th, the penultimate one, is transition time. And I would say I'm always very good at this. And I structured a approach where I gave myself 6 months to get out of it. Now, this is very similar to selling a business, and it requires a degree of self-awareness and maturity. I allowed 3 to 6 months to do a transition, assuming that 1 to 3 months would be recruitment, 1 to 3 months would be onboarding and bedding in. And that has turned out to be just about the right time frame. Now, there's been some deadlines that have been up against it to get done for the end of that 6 month deadline. There's been other ones that were done piece of cake in the first week. But that transition time, allowing it emotionally, mentally, physically, being ready for it, was about right for me. And I would say you want to allow enough time. And also understand that it's delegation, not abdication. And when you sell a company, what I see is sellers can often check out too soon. And it does damage to the transition. It does damage to the handover. And in a sales process, it will do damage to your earnout or your deferred payment in a transition where you're leveling up and stepping up and stepping out. It can do damage to the ongoing performance of the business. You need to do it right, do it once, delegate effectively, but not abdicate. My feedback to the team coming in is, up until the end of this transition, which is 6 months, I will be available all day, every day if you need me. Here's my private phone number, which hardly ever people have. If you need me at 3 o'clock in the morning, you get hold of me. I'm available at your disposal. But understand, when we get to the end of this, I'm off. See you later. You're then running the show. But for the next 6 months, you can use me as much as you need to use me. So it gives enough space to create that. It creates an environment, and I've sense checked this many times, where the team feel like they've got the support, the access, the resource they need. And this works through delegation of stepping up and breaking through. It's also the same for PDPs when you're leveling up people in your team. But it also has an end date. It can't go on indefinitely. You don't want to end up with a 3-legged race. You invest PDP, time, money. You invest transition, but then you step out and you get the return. It has to be a win-win-win. And then finally, the value that I add from doing nothing is significant. And what I mean by this is the value that I add from doing nothing in the business, as in not being involved, is significant. So being a board member, a non-exec board member, which I've done for years. I've been non-exec board member. I've taken non-exec seats for probably a decade, where I advise people on running their businesses, but I have no executive involvement. And the value you can add there significantly. Sometimes it's just seeing the wood from the trees. They're stuck in the day-to-day. They got wound up. They're going to fire this person. You realise actually that person's just burnt out, or you're just irritable, and you can just see the wood from the trees. In other cases, it's the fact that I've done this for 21 years. I've run multi-million-pound companies. I've bought and sold, I don't even know how many, probably over 30 companies. I know how this stuff works. I've studied psychology. I know human behavior. I know marketing, sales, operations, and finance inside out. Yes, people can do it better than me, and that's why they're there, but I know how it all works. Doing nothing in the business, I can add significant value with that additional perspective, telling some people to speed up, telling some people to slow down. And that has been a real reassuring thing that actually I should be at the chairman level. I shouldn't be in the business. Most of my value is added by doing nothing in the business, but also it's a double entendre. The value I add from doing nothing is significant. And to finish on this is, now I have more time and I have more headspace. The quality of the work that I do is through the roof because I have time to do it. I enjoy it. I can do it, think about it, come back to it, change it. I'm ahead of deadlines rather than behind them. And you just can't do that in an executive role. In an executive role, you're normally always up against it, chasing your tail. You're onto one thing to the next. In a chairman role, you have more time. And it reminds me of when I was an entrepreneur at the beginning, the quality of work that I can do. And the second is when I'm doing nothing. And those of you that listen to my strategy for this year, one of my objectives is working in the garden. When I'm out walking and I'm just chilling in the mornings, drinking my green tea, or I'm out even just going to the gym on a weekday afternoon and I'm not working, the value that I add from doing nothing is significant because I'm just sitting there thinking. I'll get up at 4 or 5 in the morning and go and spend 2 hours sitting in my Zen den, literally just staring at the wall and drinking green tea. But the value that comes from doing nothing, from having that space and time to think about things, is significant. They're £1 million ideas. They're £100,000 cost saving strategies. They're solutions to problems that nobody else has the time to solve at that level. And the value that I add from doing nothing in that double entendre is significant. Hopefully that's added value. Hopefully you can see the sort of process that I've experienced. For many of you, this might be a few years away. For some of you listening, this might absolutely what you need to do. Equally, a lot of those methods, mantras, and methodologies would apply at any level in your business. So hopefully you got value from that. That is the first 6 months of me moving from an executive director role into a chairman role for the last time in my group. And I will be sure to keep you posted as things progress. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you've not signed up to one of the 3-day Blueprint events, it's the annual events. Go to www.don'ttalktotenants.co.uk. It's only 150 places. If you're overseas, you can do it virtually. If you're in the UK, you can attend it in person. It's got a 100% money back guarantee. We've been delivering them for 11 years. Don't be the one that missed the boat. Go and secure your place now at www.don'ttalktotenants.co.uk, and I'll see you on the next podcast.